The tension between Ryan and Ethan was palpable, and while most students chose to either cheer for Ryan or marvel at Ethan's boldness, Claire found herself in an unusual position, stuck in the middle. She wasn't sure how it happened. Perhaps it was her knack for listening or her innate empathy, but somehow, Claire had become the unofficial confidant for both boys. And with the Crestwood champion competition heating up, that role was proving to be more complicated than she had anticipated. The competition had only just begun, but the tension between Ryan and Ethan was already reaching a boiling point. What complicated things further was Claire. Caught between the two boys, her growing connection with Ethan began to strain her long-standing friendship with Ryan.
It started subtly. Ryan noticed how Claire seemed to laugh a little more when she was with Ethan. He saw how she leaned in when Ethan spoke, her eyes lighting up as if he were revealing some profound truth. For Ryan, who had always considered Claire his closest confidant, it felt like something precious was slipping away. One afternoon, Ryan found Claire in the music room, where she "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Claire looked up, smiling. "Hey, Ryan, what's up?"
He shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just wanted to see if you wanted to hang out, it's been a while." Claire's fingers paused on the keys, her smile faltering. "Yeah, sorry about that. Things have been hectic."
Hectic, or Ethan? The words escaped Ryan's mouth before he could stop them.
Claire's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Ryan stepped into the room, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "It means I barely see you anymore because you're always with him. What's going on, Claire?" She stood, crossing her arms. "Nothing is going on, Ryan. Ethan's my friend. Why is that such a big deal?"
"Because it feels like you're choosing him over me." Ryan's voice rose, echoing in the empty room.
Claire's face softened, but her tone remained firm. "I'm not choosing anyone. You and Ethan have turned this into some kind of war, and I'm stuck in the middle. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is?" Ryan looked away, his jaw tight. "He doesn't belong here, Claire. He's just trying to prove something, and you're letting him use you to do it."
Chapter 1. Welcome to Crestwood Academy. Crestwood Academy wasn't just a school, it was an institution, a beacon of prestige in the heart of upstate New York. With its sprawling campus of ivy-covered buildings, state-of-the-art facilities, and centuries-old traditions, Crestwood symbolized the heights of American excellence. For the privileged few who could afford the steep tuition fees or earned one of the elusive scholarships, Crestwood was a gateway to opportunity.
It was early September, and the fall semester was just beginning. The campus buzzed with activity as students poured in, hauling luggage and catching up with friends they hadn't seen all summer. Among them was Ryan Carter, stepping out of his father's sleek black Range Rover. Ryan was Crestwood royalty. As the son of Charles Carter, a real estate mogul and a Crestwood alumnus, Ryan had grown up surrounded by wealth and expectations. Dressed in a designer jacket and perfectly tailored jeans, he cut an impressive figure, his confident smirk hinting at a life accustomed to winning. Behind him, his father barked reminders about maintaining their family's reputation, but Ryan barely listened. Crestwood was his territory, and he planned to dominate it, both on the football field and off.
A few yards away, Ethan Brooks arrived in stark contrast. Clutching a battered duffel bag, he stepped off a crowded bus, his gaze sweeping over the campus with equal parts awe and determination. For Ethan, Crestwood wasn't just a school, it was his ticket out of a small-town life overshadowed by struggle. Ethan had spent his summer flipping burgers at a diner to afford the little things that his scholarship didn't cover. He stood out, not because of what he wore, but because of his demeanor, quiet, focused, and sharp-eyed. As he walked toward the dorms, some of the other students shot him curious glances. It wasn't every day that someone from Ethan's background made it to Crestwood. Meanwhile, Claire Winters arrived in her usual whirlwind of energy. She stepped out of a sleek convertible, her blonde hair catching the sunlight and her meticulously styled outfit setting the tone for the school year. Claire was the quintessential it girl of Crestwood, but she wasn't just about appearances. Beneath her polished exterior lay a sharp mind and an ambitious heart. "Claire," called her best friend, Amy, rushing over with a grin. Claire waved, but her eyes were already scanning the crowd. "It's going to be a big year," Claire said, half to herself, half to Amy. It wasn't long before the first assembly of the year brought the entire student body together in the grand auditorium. The Crestwood crest, a lion flanked by laurel branches, adorned the stage, and Principal Davenport stood at the podium, commanding silence. "Welcome back, students," Davenport began, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "This year promises to be one of the most competitive and rewarding years Crestwood has ever seen. And, of course, the highlight will be the Crestwood Champion competition. The room erupted in whispers. Every student knew what the competition meant. It wasn't just a test of academics, athletics, and talent. It was the ultimate status symbol, a golden ticket to the college of their dreams. In the coming weeks, Davenport continued, you will have the opportunity to prove yourselves in ways that will define your time here. Remember, Crestwood is not just about individual achievement. It's about character, collaboration, and excellence. As the assembly ended, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation.
Think you've got what it takes to win this year, Carter? Teased Brad, one of Ryan's football teammates.
Ryan smirked, leaning back in his chair. I don't think. I know. Ethan, seated a few rows behind, overheard the exchange and rolled his eyes. Typical rich kid bravado. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan felt a tap on his shoulder. You're new, right? The voice belonged to Claire, who had wandered over out of curiosity.
Ethan nodded, caught off guard by her friendly tone. Yeah, just got in on a scholarship. Interesting, Claire said, her eyes scanning him thoughtfully. Good luck, then, you'll need it. Ethan wasn't sure if it was a warning or encouragement, but before he could respond, Claire had already moved on, her presence leaving an impression he couldn't shake. That evening, as the campus settled into its usual rhythm, Ryan, Ethan, and Claire found themselves at crossroads.
Ryan lounged in his dorm room, scrolling through messages on his phone. He wasn't worried about the competition, winning was a given. But something about this year felt different. Maybe it was the mounting pressure from his father or the nagging feeling that he needed to prove himself, not just to others but to himself. Ethan sat in the campus library, poring over his textbooks. The Crestwood champion title wasn't just a trophy to him, it was a chance to show the world, and himself, that he belonged here.
Claire, meanwhile, stood on the terrace of her dorm, staring out at the glittering campus lights. She wasn't entirely sure why she'd spoken to Ethan earlier, but she liked the way he didn't try to impress her. Crestwood was full of people trying to be something they weren't, and she wanted more than that this year.
As the night deepened, the three students unknowingly began a journey that would intertwine their lives in unexpected ways. Crestwood Academy, with all its grandeur and glamour, was more than just a school. It was a stage, and the drama was only just beginning. Please like the video and subscribe the channel. Chapter 2. The rivalry begins. The announcement of the Crestwood champion competition sent a wave of excitement and tension through the corridors of Crestwood Academy. The prestigious contest, held annually, tested students on three pillars: academics, athletics, and talent. Winning the title was more than just an accolade, it was a stepping stone to scholarships, college recommendations, and school-wide admiration. Ryan Parker, the quintessential golden boy, was among the first to hear about the competition. With his neatly combed blonde hair, confident stride, and dazzling smile, he exuded an air of natural superiority. Teachers adored his academic achievements, while his peers admired his athletic prowess on the football field. Ryan was the kind of guy who didn't just want to win, he expected to win. Ethan Carter, on the other hand, couldn't care less about Ryan's charm. Ethan was the new kid in town, a scrappy, dark-haired rebel with an edgy attitude and a penchant for standing out. His sharp wit, brooding eyes, and knack for solving complex problems had quickly earned him the attention of his classmates. Though his demeanor screamed lone wolf, his undeniable talent made him hard to ignore.
The two couldn't have been more different, yet they both stood in the same crowd that day as the principal, Mrs. Harper, took the stage to announce the competition. Students, Mrs. Harper began, her voice commanding yet warm, I am thrilled to officially announce the beginning of this year's Crestwood Champion competition. This is your chance to showcase your skills, push your limits, and prove what it means to be the best of the best at Crestwood. Cheers erupted from the crowd, with students whispering and nudging one another. Some were excited, others intimidated. Ryan smirked, already envisioning his name engraved on the winner's plaque. Ethan, leaning casually against the wall, crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. The competition, Mrs. Harper continued, will be divided into 3 rounds: academics, athletics, and talent. The winner of each round will earn points, and the student with the highest total at the end will claim the title of Crestwood champion. Ryan straightened his posture, his confidence radiating. Piece of cake, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Ethan's sharp ears caught the comment. He shot Ryan a sideways glance, his lips curling into a smirk. Careful, Parker, Ethan said coolly, his voice laced with challenge. Overconfidence might just be your downfall. Ryan turned to face him, his blue eyes narrowing. And who are you again? He asked, feigning ignorance. Ethan Carter, Ethan replied, his tone even. The guy who doesn't think you're as untouchable as you like to believe.
A hush fell over the immediate group of students, all eyes darting between the two boys. It was an unspoken rule at Crestwood. No one challenged Ryan Parker, at least not openly. But Ethan's nonchalant demeanor suggested he hadn't gotten the memo, or didn't care.
Ryan stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "Listen, Carter," he said, his voice dropping. "This competition isn't just about showing up. It's about winning. And I don't plan on losing to some."
"Somewhat," Ethan interjected, his tone sharp. "New kid, outsider, someone who doesn't fit into your little kingdom." Before Ryan could respond, Mrs. Harper's voice cut through the tension. "I encourage everyone to bring their best selves to this competition," she said, her tone pointed as her gaze swept over Ryan and Ethan. "Remember, this is about growth and sportsmanship, not petty rivalries." The two boys broke eye contact, but the fire between them had already been ignited.
As the crowd dispersed, Ryan's best friend, Jason, approached him. "What's up with that Carter guy?" Jason asked, falling into step beside Ryan. "Nothing I can't handle," Ryan replied, his tone dismissive. "He's just looking for attention. Probably thinks he can make a name for himself by going after me." Jason chuckled. Good luck to him. Nobody beats Ryan Parker. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself cornered by Mia, a bright-eyed drama enthusiast with a knack for reading people. "So, you've decided to pick a fight with Crestwood royalty?" she asked, her voice tinged with amusement. "Not a fight," Ethan corrected. "Just leveling the playing field. Someone needs to remind Parker that he's not untouchable." Mia tilted her head, studying him. "You do realize he's got the entire school wrapped around his finger, right?"
Ethan shrugged. "Then it's about time someone untangles it."
The following week saw the start of the competition's first round, academics. The school library was transformed into a battleground of intellect, with rows of desks arranged for a grueling quiz bowl. Students whispered nervously, while Ryan and Ethan each took their seats, their expressions focused and determined.
As the questions began, it became clear that both boys were forces to be reckoned with. Ryan answered quickly and confidently, his polished demeanor never faltering. Ethan, in contrast, took a more calculated approach, pausing briefly before delivering precise, thought-out answers.
The tension between them was palpable, with each correct response escalating the stakes. When Ryan nailed a tricky calculus problem, Ethan countered with an impeccable analysis of a Shakespearean sonnet. By the end of the round, the scores were neck and neck. Mrs. Harper announced the results. Ryan led by a single point. "Better luck next time," Ryan said smugly as he passed Ethan on his way out. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Parker," he shot back. "This is just the beginning."
The athletic round followed soon after, bringing the rivalry to the school gymnasium. From relay races to basketball drills, the competition pushed every participant to their limits. Ryan's athletic prowess shone brightly, his movements smooth and practiced. But Ethan surprised everyone with his raw speed and agility, proving he was no pushover.
Their rivalry came to a head during a one-on-one basketball match, where the crowd gathered to watch the showdown. Ryan's calculated plays clashed with Ethan's unpredictable moves, resulting in a nail-biting game. The final whistle blew with Ryan narrowly taking the win. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Ethan wasn't fazed. 2 rounds down, he muttered to himself, wiping sweat from his brow. 1 to go. The talent round, however, promised to be the most unpredictable. It was one thing to answer questions or score points, but showcasing unique abilities required a different kind of bravery. In the days leading up to the final round, Ryan and Ethan found themselves preparing in their own ways. Ryan practiced a flawless piano piece, aiming to dazzle the audience with his precision and finesse. Ethan, true to his rebellious nature, opted for a guitar solo he had written himself, a raw, emotional piece that reflected his journey so far. As the stage was set for the talent show, the entire school buzzed with anticipation. Who would emerge victorious? Ryan, the golden boy who had always been on top? Or Ethan, the dark horse determined to prove his worth? One thing was certain. The rivalry had only just begun. Please like the video and subscribe the channel. Chapter 3. Shared secrets. The crisp morning air carried a sense of unease as Claire Hastings walked through Crestwood Academy's sunlit courtyard. The tension between Ryan and Ethan was palpable, and while most students chose to either cheer for Ryan or marvel at Ethan's boldness, Claire found herself in an unusual position, stuck in the middle. She wasn't sure how it happened. Perhaps it was her knack for listening or her innate empathy, but somehow, Claire had become the unofficial confidant for both boys. And with the Crestwood champion competition heating up, that role was proving to be more complicated than she had anticipated. Claire was in the library, her favorite sanctuary, when Ryan approached her. He moved with his usual confidence, but Claire noticed a flicker of something else in his expression, hesitation. Claire, he said, sliding into the seat across from her, you've got a minute? She looked up from her book, raising an eyebrow. Ryan Parker needs my help, should I be flattered or concerned?
He chuckled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I need someone to talk to. And you're, well, good at that. Claire leaned back in her chair, closing her book. I'm listening. Ryan hesitated, running a hand through his neatly styled blonde hair. It's this competition, he admitted. I know I make it look like I've got everything under control, but it's a lot of pressure. Everyone expects me to win. My parents, the teachers, even my friends. It's like losing isn't even an option. Claire softened. You're allowed to feel overwhelmed, you know. You don't have to carry all of that on your own. Ryan looked away, his jaw tightening. Easier said than done. My dad always says, Parker men don't fail. So I can't. Simple as that. The vulnerability in his voice caught Claire off guard. She had always seen Ryan as the golden boy, someone who thrived under pressure. But now, she saw the cracks in his armor. Before she could respond, Ethan appeared, leaning against the nearest bookshelf. His dark hair fell messily over his forehead, and his expression was as unreadable as ever.
Didn't mean to interrupt, Ethan said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Ryan's face hardened instantly. What do you want, Carter?
Ethan shrugged. Just looking for a quiet corner. Didn't realize this was your kingdom too.
Claire sighed, sensing the brewing storm. Can you two not do this for 5 minutes? She asked, her voice firm.
Ethan smirked, pushing off the bookshelf. Fine, I'll find another spot. Don't want to ruin Parker's moment of self-reflection.
As he turned to leave, Claire called after him. Wait.
Ethan paused, glancing over his shoulder. Stay, she said, surprising both boys. We're all dealing with something here. Maybe it wouldn't kill you two to stop snapping at each other and just talk.
Ryan scoffed. Yeah, because that'll solve everything. Claire shot him a pointed look. You said you wanted to talk, didn't you? Or is that only true when it's just me? Ryan opened his mouth to argue but closed it again. Ethan, intrigued by Claire's boldness, pulled up a chair and sat down. All right, he said, crossing his arms. What's this, group therapy? Claire ignored the sarcasm. Why are you really here, Ethan?
For a moment, he didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the table. Then he sighed. Fine, you want honesty? Here it is. I'm tired of being the outsider. Everyone in this school looks at me like I don't belong here. Like I'm some charity case who doesn't know his place. Claire's heart ached at the bitterness in his voice. I moved here because my mom thought this school would be good for me, Ethan continued, but all it's done is remind me how different I am from everyone else. Ryan frowned, his competitive edge giving way to curiosity. What do you mean, different? Ethan met his gaze, his eyes challenging. Not everyone has a perfect life, Parker. Some of us have to fight for everything we have. The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Ryan didn't have a snarky reply. Claire looked between them, her heart conflicted. She saw two boys who, despite their differences, were more alike than they realized. Both carried burdens they didn't want others to see. Ethan, she said gently, you belong here just as much as anyone else. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. He gave her a small, grateful nod but didn't respond. Ryan broke the silence. Look, I get it, he said, surprising both of them. You think I've got it easy. But trust me, the pressure to be perfect isn't all it's cracked up to be. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Oh, please. Your biggest problem is deciding which trophy to add to your collection. Ryan's jaw tightened, but instead of snapping back, he said, you don't know anything about my life. And you don't know anything about mine, Ethan countered. Claire held up her hands. Enough. Can we agree that you both have struggles and leave it at that? The boys exchanged a reluctant glance but said nothing. Over the next few days, Claire found herself spending more time with both Ryan and Ethan, often acting as a mediator between their clashing personalities. She learned more about Ryan's relentless drive to meet his father's expectations and Ethan's struggles to find his place in a new environment. But as she grew closer to them, she felt a pang of guilt. Both boys trusted her, and she valued her connection with each of them. Yet their rivalry, and the unspoken tension beneath it, kept pulling her in different directions. One afternoon, as she walked to the art room, Ethan caught up to her. Claire, he said, his voice unusually hesitant, thanks for, listening. I'm not great at opening up, but you make it easier. She smiled. Anytime. Before she could say more, Ryan appeared from the opposite direction. His face lit up when he saw her, but his expression darkened slightly when he noticed Ethan. Claire, Ryan said, ignoring Ethan, I was wondering if you'd help me with my talent round prep. I've got a new piece I want to try out, and you're the only one whose opinion I trust. Ethan crossed his arms. Right. Because Claire doesn't have enough to deal with already. Claire sighed, sensing another argument brewing. Guys, stop. I'm not picking sides. Ryan frowned. It's not about sides. Ethan smirked. Sure it isn't. As they glared at each other, Claire felt a sinking realization. The boys were growing closer to her, and, unintentionally, she was becoming the center of their rivalry. She didn't know how long she could keep the peace, but one thing was clear, the secrets they had shared with her would only make things more complicated. Please like the video and subscribe the channel. Chapter 4. The First Challenge. The academic phase of the Crestwood Champion competition had arrived, and with it came an air of anticipation that buzzed through the halls of Crestwood Academy. The event would be held in the school's grand auditorium, transformed into a battleground of intellect for the day. The stage was set with rows of sleek desks, each equipped with a monitor, a keypad, and a nameplate for the participants. Ryan Parker sat in the front row, his jaw tight as he scanned the crowd. His father, Mr. Charles Parker, stood at the back of the auditorium, arms crossed. Even from a distance, Ryan could feel the weight of his father's gaze. The older Parker wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, his expectations were clear. Winning wasn't just a goal, it was an obligation.
Ryan's best friend, Jason, leaned over from the seat next to him. You've got this, man. Just stay cool and do what you always do, win. Ryan forced a smile, but his confidence felt like a thin veneer. Meanwhile, Ethan Carter strolled in, his hands stuffed casually into the pockets of his black hoodie. He looked around the auditorium with a mix of curiosity and indifference, finally spotting Claire near the middle row. He offered her a quick smile before taking his place 2 seats away from Ryan. Comfortable, Parker? Ethan asked, his tone light but tinged with challenge. Ryan didn't look at him. More than you, Carter. Hope you're ready for a reality check.
Let's see who gets checked, Ethan replied, leaning back in his chair.
The principal, Mrs. Harper, stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking against the polished wood. She addressed the audience with a calm authority.
Welcome, students, staff, and families, to the academic phase of the Crestwood Champion competition, she began. Today, our participants will face a series of timed questions across various subjects: mathematics, science, history, and literature. Each correct answer earns points, and the top scorers will move on to the next phase. The crowd erupted into polite applause as the monitors flickered to life, displaying the competition's logo. Contestants, Mrs. Harper continued, you may begin. The first round of questions appeared on the screens, and the room fell silent except for the clicking of keyboards. Ryan's fingers flew over the keys as he worked through a calculus problem. Numbers and equations came easily to him, but his focus kept slipping. His father's words from that morning echoed in his mind. This is your chance to show them what a Parker is made of. Don't disappoint me. Ryan clenched his jaw, willing the doubt away. 2 seats over, Ethan worked methodically, his expression calm and confident. While Ryan's movements were swift and sharp, Ethan took his time, carefully analyzing each question before submitting his answers. His strategy was paying off. He consistently finished seconds before the timer but rarely second-guessed himself. Claire watched from the audience, her heart tugging in 2 directions. Ryan, despite his confidence, seemed unnervingly tense. Ethan, on the other hand, looked like he was in his element. As the rounds progressed, the leaderboard displayed on the auditorium's main screen told the story. Ethan's name steadily climbed to the top, while Ryan hovered just below him. The gap between them wasn't large, but it was there, and growing. When a particularly tricky history question stumped the other contestants, Ethan's answer appeared on the board first, earning him a round of murmured approval from the crowd. Ryan's hands balled into fists under the desk. The final question of the round was a literature problem, analyzing a passage from Pride and Prejudice. While most contestants struggled to decode Jane Austen's language, Ethan's answer popped up almost instantly, earning him full points. Ryan, thrown off by the speed of Ethan's response, fumbled on his submission and lost critical time. When the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the phase, the leaderboard froze in place. 1. Ethan Carter 96 points. 2. Ryan Parker 91 points. The room erupted into applause as Mrs. Harper took the stage again. Congratulations to all participants for an excellent first phase, she said, her smile genuine. And a special acknowledgement to Ethan Carter, our top scorer of the day. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips as his name received a wave of applause. Ryan, on the other hand, stared at the screen, his face a mix of disbelief and frustration. As the crowd filed out, Claire approached Ryan. Hey, she said softly, you did great. Ryan's eyes met hers, and for a moment, his mask of confidence slipped. It wasn't enough, he muttered.
It's one phase, Claire said, there's still time to catch up. Before Ryan could respond, Ethan walked by, his victory stride unmistakable. Nice try, Parker, he said, his tone casual but pointed, maybe next round.
Ryan's fists clenched. Don't get too comfortable, Carter. This isn't over.
Ethan stopped and turned, his smirk fading into something more serious. It's not about being comfortable, he said. It's about proving I'm just as good as anyone else here. Maybe even better. The words hit Ryan harder than he expected. For the first time, he saw Ethan not as a rival to defeat but as someone with his own battle to fight. Claire, standing between them, felt the tension rise again. All right, that's enough, she said firmly. You're both incredible in your own ways, can't you just? Not a chance, Ryan interrupted, his competitive fire reigniting. Ethan shook his head, a small smile returning, didn't think so.
With that, he walked away, leaving Ryan and Claire alone. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I can't lose to him, he said quietly. Claire placed a hand on his arm. Maybe it's not about him, she said. Maybe it's about proving something to yourself. Ryan didn't respond, but her words lingered as he watched Ethan disappear into the crowd. For Ethan, the victory felt good, but not complete. As he walked out of the auditorium, he glanced back at the scoreboard, his name glowing at the top. Winning the first phase was just the beginning. The real challenge was ahead, and he knew Ryan wouldn't back down. Neither would he. Chapter 5. Love and Loyalties. The days following the academic challenge were anything but peaceful at Crestwood Academy. The competition had only just begun, but the tension between Ryan and Ethan was already reaching a boiling point. What complicated things further was Claire, caught between the two boys. Her growing connection with Ethan began to strain her long-standing friendship with Ryan. It started subtly. Ryan noticed how Claire seemed to laugh a little more when she was with Ethan. He saw how she leaned in when Ethan spoke, her eyes lighting up as if he were revealing some profound truth. For Ryan, who had always considered Claire his closest confidant, it felt like something precious was slipping away.
One afternoon, Ryan found Claire in the music room, where she often went to practice piano. The soft notes of a classical melody filled the air as he entered, his footsteps echoing against the hardwood floor. Hey, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Claire looked up, smiling. Hey, Ryan. What's up? He shrugged, trying to appear casual. Just wanted to see if you wanted to hang out, it's been a while. Claire's fingers paused on the keys, her smile faltering. Yeah, sorry about that. Things have been hectic. Hectic, or Ethan? The words escaped Ryan's mouth before he could stop them. Claire's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean?
Ryan stepped into the room, his frustration bubbling to the surface. It means I barely see you anymore because you're always with him. What's going on, Claire? She stood, crossing her arms. Nothing is going on, Ryan. Ethan's my friend. Why is that such a big deal? Because it feels like you're choosing him over me. Ryan's voice rose, echoing in the empty room.
Claire's face softened, but her tone remained firm. I'm not choosing anyone. You and Ethan have turned this into some kind of war, and I'm stuck in the middle. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is? Ryan looked away, his jaw tight. He doesn't belong here, Claire. He's just trying to prove something, and you're letting him use you to do it. That's not fair, she said, her voice sharp. Ethan's been nothing but honest with me. Maybe if you stopped seeing him as your rival, you'd see he's not as different from you as you think. Ryan shook his head, turning toward the door. You're wrong, he muttered. You'll see. Claire watched him leave, her chest tightening. She hated this divide, but deep down, she knew it wasn't something she could fix for them.
Later that evening, Claire found herself in the school's courtyard, where Ethan was leaning against a bench, his notebook open in his lap. The golden light of the setting sun cast a warm glow over the scene, but Ethan seemed lost in thought.
Hey, Claire said, sitting beside him. Ethan glanced up, a small smile tugging at his lips. Hey, Claire, what's up?
She hesitated, unsure how to broach the topic. Ryan's upset about us spending time together.
Ethan's smile faded. Figures. Parker can't handle not being the center of attention. It's not like that, Claire said quickly. He feels like he's losing me. Ethan closed his notebook, leaning back against the bench. And are you? The question caught her off guard. What, are you losing him? Ethan asked, his dark eyes steady on hers. Claire sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know. I care about both of you, but this rivalry is making everything so complicated.
Ethan's expression softened. I get it, but for what it's worth, I'm glad we've gotten closer. You're different from anyone I've met here. Claire felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Different how? He chuckled, looking down. You don't care about the stuff most people here care about. Status, money, appearances. You actually see people for who they are. That's rare. His words sent a warmth through her chest, but it also deepened her guilt. She cared about Ethan, there was no denying that, but her connection with Ryan was equally important to her.
You're not making this easier, you know, she said, her tone teasing but tinged with honesty. Ethan grinned, didn't think it was supposed to be easy. The tension came to a head during a group project in history class. Ryan, Claire, and Ethan had been assigned to the same team, much to Ryan's visible irritation.
They gathered in the library after school, books and laptops spread across the table. Ryan took the lead, outlining their approach to the project with military precision.
Claire, you can handle the research. I'll put together the presentation, and Ethan. He paused, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You can write the introduction.
Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Parker. But I think I'll handle the analysis. You can take the introduction.
Ryan's jaw tightened. I don't think so. Guys, come on, Claire interjected, her patience wearing thin. This is supposed to be a group effort. Ryan ignored her, his gaze locked on Ethan. You think you can just walk in here and take over? This is my team.
Funny, Ethan said, his smirk fading into something colder. I thought it was our team. Or does that only apply when things go your way?
The two boys stood, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor. Stop it, Claire's voice cut through the tension, drawing both their attention.
This isn't about the project, and you both know it, she said, her voice trembling with frustration. You're using me as an excuse to fight, and I'm done being in the middle.
Ryan and Ethan exchanged a glance, both looking guilty but unwilling to back down. Claire gathered her things, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Figure out the project without me, she said, her voice quieter now. I need a break from both of you. She walked out of the library, leaving Ryan and Ethan standing in silence. For the rest of the evening, Claire couldn't shake the heaviness in her chest. She cared deeply for both boys, but their inability to set aside their differences was tearing her apart.
In their own ways, Ryan and Ethan both struggled with feelings of inadequacy, Ryan under the weight of his father's expectations, and Ethan in his fight to prove he belonged. Claire had seen their vulnerabilities, their hopes, and their fears. She knew they were more alike than they realized, but she also knew their rivalry wasn't going to fade easily. As she sat on her bed that night, staring at her phone, Please like the video and subscribe the channel.
Chapter 6. Breaking point. The tension that had been simmering between Ryan, Claire, and Ethan finally boiled over as the competition progressed. Misunderstandings piled on top of unspoken feelings, creating a volatile mixture that none of them could contain. The academic challenge was behind them, and the athletic phase loomed, but the real struggle was happening off the competition stage.
For Ryan, the pressure from his father combined with his insecurities about Claire and Ethan's growing friendship created a storm of frustration and anger. Every time he saw them together, laughing or talking in the hallway, it felt like a betrayal. Claire, the one person he thought would always have his back, was slipping away, and into Ethan's orbit. Ethan, for his part, was caught between wanting to focus on the competition and feeling the pull of his bond with Claire. He liked her, more than he'd initially realized, but he also knew how much Ryan valued their friendship. Still, Ryan's constant hostility made it impossible for Ethan to consider backing down. He wasn't going to apologize for being himself or for the connection he shared with Claire. Claire, stuck in the middle, felt the weight of their expectations crushing her. She cared deeply for both boys, but their rivalry was driving her to exhaustion. She wanted to believe she could fix things, but the more they clashed, the more impossible it seemed.
It all came to a head on a crisp Friday afternoon. The school gymnasium buzzed with activity as students prepared for the next phase of the Crestwood Champion competition. Claire stood near the bleachers, organizing supplies for the upcoming athletic events. She was lost in thought when Ethan appeared beside her. Need a hand? He asked, flashing a smile. Claire glanced at him, her lips twitching into a half-smile. Sure, thanks. They worked in silence for a moment, the air between them heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Hey, about the other day in the library. Claire shook her head. Let's not, it's fine. It's not fine, Ethan said, his voice low but firm. I don't want you to feel like you're stuck in the middle of all this. Ryan and we're just
being stubborn, Claire interjected, raising an eyebrow.
Ethan chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. Fair enough, but for what it's worth, I don't want to make things harder for you. Claire sighed, her shoulders slumping. I just wish you two could see what I see. You're both amazing in your own ways, but this competition has turned you into enemies. Before Ethan could respond, a voice interrupted them.
Of course you'd be here. They turned to see Ryan standing a few feet away, his expression a mixture of anger and betrayal.
Claire straightened. Ryan, this isn't what it looks like. Oh, save it, Claire, Ryan snapped, stepping closer. I've seen enough to know exactly what's going on. Ethan crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. And what's that supposed to mean? It means, Ryan said, his voice rising, that you've been worming your way into Claire's life just to mess with me. First the competition, now this. What's next, Carter?
Ethan's eyes narrowed. You really think this is all about you? Maybe Claire actually enjoys spending time with me.
That's enough. Claire's voice cut through their argument, drawing both boys' attention. She looked between them, her eyes blazing with frustration. Do you two even hear yourselves? You're acting like this is some kind of game, like I'm some kind of prize. Newsflash, I'm not.
Ryan blinked, his anger momentarily giving way to confusion. Claire, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Ryan? She shot back. Because all I've seen lately is you trying to control everything, me, this competition, Ethan. I'm tired of it. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Ethan, sensing an opportunity, stepped forward. Maybe it's time you admit the truth, Parker. You're not mad at me, you're mad at yourself. You're so scared of losing that you can't see what's right in front of you. Ryan's fists clenched. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Ethan said, his voice steady. I know you're terrified of not living up to your father's expectations. And I know that instead of dealing with that, you've decided to take it out on everyone around you. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Ryan stared at Ethan, his face flushing with a mix of rage and humiliation.
Stop it, Claire said, her voice trembling. Just, stop. She turned to Ryan, her expression softening. Ryan, I care about you. I always have. But I can't keep being your sounding board for everything you're afraid to admit to yourself. You need to figure out who you are outside of what your dad expects. Ryan looked at her, his chest tightening. Claire, And you, she said, rounding on Ethan. You're not innocent in this either. You push Ryan's buttons every chance you get, and for what? To prove you're better than him. You're both so caught up in this competition that you've forgotten what really matters. Ethan opened his mouth, but Claire held up a hand to stop him. No, I'm done. If you two can't figure out how to coexist without tearing each other apart, then I'm out.
With that, she grabbed her bag and walked away, leaving both boys standing in stunned silence. The gym was quiet now, the hum of activity replaced by the distant echoes of their argument. Ryan and Ethan stood several feet apart, neither looking at the other. She's right, Ryan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan glanced at him, his expression unreadable. Yeah, she is.
For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Ryan turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat.
Ethan watched him go, a strange mix of emotions churning in his chest. Victory didn't feel like victory anymore, not when it came at such a cost. As the gym emptied and the sun dipped below the horizon, the fragile bonds between Ryan, Ethan, and Claire lay fractured, each of them left to grapple with the fallout in their own way. And as the competition heated up, so too did the realization that some wounds might never fully heal. Please like the video and subscribe the channel. Chapter 7. The Athletic Showdown. The second phase of the Crestwood Champion competition arrived with an air of anticipation that buzzed through the halls of the academy. Posters adorned every wall, and students chattered excitedly about the athletic showdown. The gymnasium and outdoor fields were prepared for the tournament, which would test the competitors' strength, speed, and teamwork. For Ryan and Ethan, the stakes felt higher than ever. Their fractured relationship with Claire hung over them like a storm cloud, but neither was willing to address it. Instead, they threw themselves into the tournament, each determined to prove something, not only to each other but to themselves. The first event of the day was a track race, a grueling test of speed and endurance. The air was cool, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the field as the competitors lined up at the starting line.
Ryan stretched his legs, his jaw clenched with determination. He could feel the weight of his father's expectations pressing down on him. Losing wasn't an option, not here, not now. A few lanes over, Ethan shook out his arms, trying to ignore the murmurs from the crowd. He wasn't a natural athlete, and he knew the odds weren't in his favor. Still, he was determined to give it his all. Winning wasn't just about proving himself to Ryan. It was about proving to everyone that he belonged at Crestwood. Claire watched from the bleachers, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hadn't spoken much to either of them since the blow-up in the gym. She wasn't sure what she wanted to see today, victory, reconciliation, or something in between. The whistle blew, and the race began. Ryan took off like a bullet, his powerful strides eating up the distance between him and the finish line.
He was in his element, his body moving on autopilot as he focused on the rhythm of his breathing and the pounding of his feet against the track.
Ethan, meanwhile, struggled to keep up. His legs burned, and his lungs felt like they were on fire, but he refused to give in. He pushed harder, gritting his teeth as he fought to stay in the race. As the competitors rounded the final curve, Ryan surged ahead, crossing the finish line with a triumphant roar. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Ethan barely heard them. He stumbled across the line moments later, panting heavily but refusing to let his disappointment show.
Ryan glanced over at Ethan, his victory tinged with bitterness. For a moment, he thought about saying something, anything, to break the silence between them. But the memory of their last argument held him back. The next event was a basketball game, designed to test teamwork and strategy. Competitors were divided into teams, and Ryan and Ethan, much to their dismay, found themselves on the same side. "Looks like we're stuck together," Ethan muttered as they huddled with their teammates. "Just stay out of my way," Ryan replied coldly. The game began, and Ryan immediately took control, calling out plays and driving the ball down the court with precision. Ethan, feeling out of place, tried to keep up, but Ryan's commanding presence left little room for anyone else. Midway through the game, Ethan saw an opening and called for the ball. Ryan hesitated for a fraction of a second before passing it to him. Ethan took the shot, and missed.
The opposing team grabbed the rebound and scored, leaving Ryan fuming. "Nice work, Carter," he snapped as they jogged back down the court. Ethan glared at him. "Maybe if you trusted someone other than yourself, we'd actually have a chance." The tension between them was palpable, and their team struggled to find a rhythm. The other competitors quickly took advantage, pulling ahead by several points. In the final minutes of the game, Ryan realized they couldn't win unless they worked together. As much as it pained him, he knew he had to trust Ethan. "Carter," he called, passing the ball to Ethan as he darted toward the basket. Ethan caught it, surprise flickering across his face. He hesitated for a moment, then drove toward the hoop, dodging defenders with a burst of speed. He jumped, releasing the ball just as the buzzer sounded. The ball arced through the air and sank into the net, securing a narrow victory for their team. The gym erupted in applause, but Ryan and Ethan barely acknowledged it. They exchanged a tense nod, the moment of cooperation already fading as they retreated to opposite sides of the court. The final event of the day was a grueling obstacle course designed to test strength, agility, and mental endurance. The course wound through the school's grounds, featuring walls to climb, ropes to swing across, and muddy pits to crawl through. As the competitors lined up at the starting point, Ryan's focus sharpened. He could feel his father's voice in the back of his mind, urging him to dominate, to leave no room for doubt about his superiority. Ethan, meanwhile, took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The obstacle course was his last chance to prove himself, and he wasn't going to waste it. The whistle blew, and they were off. Ryan shot ahead, his athleticism and discipline propelling him through the course with ease. He climbed walls and swung across ropes with precision, barely breaking a sweat. Ethan struggled at first, slipping in the mud and fumbling with the ropes. But he refused to give up. He found his rhythm, focusing on one obstacle at a time and ignoring the competitors who passed him. As they neared the final stretch, Ryan glanced over his shoulder and saw Ethan closing the gap. "No way," Ryan muttered, pushing himself harder. The last obstacle was a towering wall with a rope dangling from the top. Ryan reached it first, his arms and legs working in perfect harmony as he climbed. Ethan arrived moments later, his hands gripping the rope as he pulled himself upward. Ryan reached the top and glanced down, expecting to see Ethan struggling far below. But Ethan was only a few feet behind, his face set with determination. For a brief moment, Ryan hesitated. He thought about kicking the rope away or finding some other way to ensure his victory. But something in Ethan's expression stopped him. Instead, Ryan climbed over the wall and sprinted to the finish line, crossing it just as Ethan hauled himself over the top. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Ryan didn't feel the triumph he'd expected. He looked back at Ethan, who was catching his breath at the top of the wall, and felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. As the day ended and the results were tallied, Ryan and Ethan stood in silence, each lost in their thoughts. They had both pushed themselves to their limits, but the competition felt secondary to the unspoken conflict between them. Claire watched from a distance, her heart heavy. She saw the weariness in their faces and knew that the competition was taking its toll. She wanted to bridge the gap between them, but she also knew they had to find their own way forward. The athletic phase was over, but the battle between Ryan and Ethan was far from finished. And as the Crestwood Champion competition moved into its final stages, the stakes, for both the title and their fractured relationships, had never been higher. Please like the video and subscribe the channel.
Chapter 8. Reckoning and Reflection. The fallout from the athletic showdown lingered like a heavy fog. Ryan, Ethan, and Claire had avoided each other for days, each grappling with their own emotions. The tension between them was no longer just about the Crestwood Champion competition, it was about fractured friendships, unspoken truths, and the consequences of their choices. Claire sat in her bedroom, staring out the window as rain pattered against the glass. Her journal lay open on her lap, but the words she tried to write felt hollow. She had spent so much time trying to keep the peace between Ryan and Ethan, trying to be everything for everyone. But now, she felt drained, unsure of where she fit in the tangled web of emotions. She thought about the last few weeks, Ryan's frustration, Ethan's vulnerability, and her own conflicted feelings. It wasn't just the boys who had changed, she had changed too. She was no longer content to play mediator. She needed clarity, and she needed it now. Ryan paced the length of his family's spacious living room, his fists clenched at his sides. His father sat on the couch, a newspaper spread across his lap, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside his son. "I don't get it," Ryan muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why does he keep trying to one-up me? Why can't he just back off?"
His father lowered the newspaper, raising an eyebrow. "Who are you talking about?" "Ethan," Ryan said, his tone bitter. "He's always trying to prove he's better than me. And Claire." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "She doesn't understand. She's supposed to have my back." His father's gaze sharpened. "Ryan, let me give you some advice. Winning isn't just about beating the competition. It's about commanding respect. If you let emotions cloud your judgment, you'll lose sight of what really matters." Ryan nodded, but his father's words didn't bring the comfort he sought. Deep down, he knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about the friendships he was losing in the process. Ethan sat in the library, his usual retreat when the world felt overwhelming. Books surrounded him, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the athletic showdown in his head, focusing on Ryan's expression when he'd crossed the finish line. He had always known Ryan was competitive, but the anger in his eyes had been something else entirely. And Claire, her disappointment stung more than he wanted to admit.
Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "What am I doing?" he muttered to himself. He hadn't come to Crestwood to make enemies, and he certainly hadn't come to ruin his chances with Claire. But somewhere along the way, he had let his insecurities take control. The trio's reckoning came the next day, in the most unlikely of places, the old amphitheater behind the school. It was a forgotten corner of campus, overgrown with ivy and rarely used. Claire had texted both boys, asking them to meet her there after classes. Ryan arrived first, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets as he paced near the stage. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, hesitating before stepping into the open space. "Where's Claire?" Ethan asked, his tone wary. Ryan shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "She said to wait here." The silence between them was thick, neither willing to make the first move. Finally, Claire appeared, her expression serious. She climbed onto the stage, standing between them like a judge presiding over a trial. "Okay," she began, her voice firm. "This has gone on long enough. I'm tired of the fighting, the tension, the competition, everything. So we're going to talk, and we're going to figure this out. Right now." Ryan and Ethan exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. "Ryan," Claire said, turning to him. "Why don't you start? What's really going on with you?" Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know. I guess I've been feeling a lot of pressure. From my dad, from this competition, from everything. And then Ethan shows up and I feel like he's trying to take everything I care about." Ethan frowned. "Ryan, I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm just trying to prove that I deserve to be here. Do you have any idea what it's like to feel like you're always one step behind, no matter how hard you try?" Ryan hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't know you felt that way." "Well, I do," Ethan said. "And maybe I've been pushing too hard, but it's not because I hate you. It's because I'm scared. Scared of failing, scared of not being enough." The vulnerability in Ethan's voice caught Ryan off guard. For the first time, he saw past the rivalry and into the insecurities that drove it. Claire stepped forward, her gaze softening. "Do you see now? You're both dealing with your own struggles, but instead of helping each other, you've been tearing each other down. That's not who you are. Or at least, it's not who I thought you were." Ryan looked down, his face flushed with shame. "I'm sorry, Claire, I never wanted to hurt you." Ethan nodded. "Me neither. I guess I let my insecurities get the better of me." Claire smiled faintly. "Apology accepted. But there's one more thing I need to say." The boys looked at her expectantly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Claire said, her voice steady. "And I've realized that I can't keep putting myself in the middle of this.
It's not fair to me, and it's not helping either of you. So I'm stepping back from both of you. Ryan's eyes widened. What, Claire, you don't have to do that.
Yes, I do, she said firmly. I need time to figure out what I want, and you two need to figure out how to move forward without me as a buffer. Maybe then we can all find some kind of balance.
Ethan nodded slowly, though his expression was somber. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, me too.
Claire stepped down from the stage, pausing to look at both of them. I care about you both. But it's time for all of us to take a step back and figure out what really matters.
With that, she walked away, leaving Ryan and Ethan alone in the amphitheater. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, then Ryan turned to Ethan. So, what now? Ethan shrugged. I guess we focus on the competition. Ryan nodded. Yeah, and maybe we try to figure out how to stop being at each other's throats. Ethan smirked. Think we can manage that? Ryan chuckled, a hint of his old confidence returning. We'll see. As they walked away from the amphitheater, the weight between them felt a little lighter. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time, it felt like they were on the same path. Please like the video and subscribe the channel.
Chapter 9. The final stage. The day of the talent round had arrived, and Crestwood Academy buzzed with excitement. This was the final stage of the competition, the moment when everything, reputation, pride, and the title of Crestwood champion, hung in the balance. The theater was packed, students and faculty alike eager to see what the finalists had to offer.
Backstage, Ryan, Ethan, and the other competitors prepared for their performances. The tension in the air was palpable, each student grappling with their nerves and the weight of expectations. Ryan sat on a bench, tuning his guitar. Music was something he rarely shared with others, a private escape from the pressures of his life. His father had always dismissed it as a waste of time, but today, Ryan was determined to prove otherwise, not to his father, but to himself.
Ethan, on the other side of the room, adjusted his costume for a monologue he had painstakingly written and rehearsed. Theater had always been his passion, a place where he felt free to express himself without fear of judgment. But as he glanced around the room, his confidence wavered. What if it wasn't enough? Claire sat in the audience, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken much to Ryan or Ethan since her decision to step back, but she had come to support them both. She knew how much this moment meant to each of them, though for very different reasons. The competition began with a series of performances that ranged from piano solos to intricate dance routines. The audience cheered and applauded, their energy electrifying the room. Finally, it was Ryan's turn. He stepped onto the stage, his guitar slung over his shoulder, and took a deep breath as he adjusted the microphone. Hi, he said, his voice steady despite the nerves swirling inside him. This song is something I wrote a while back. It's about figuring out who you are when the world keeps telling you who you should be. The first chords rang out, soft and haunting, drawing the audience into his world. Ryan's voice, rich and full of emotion, carried the lyrics across the room. I've been chasing shadows, running from the light. Trying to be perfect, but nothing feels right. As he played, Ryan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. This was his truth, laid bare for everyone to see. The pressure of his father's expectations, the rivalry with Ethan, the strained relationship with Claire, it all poured into the song. When he finished, the theater erupted in applause. Ryan glanced at Claire in the audience, catching her soft smile. It wasn't a victory, it was something more meaningful, understanding. Ethan was next. He stepped onto the stage, the spotlight illuminating his face, and took a moment to steady himself. This piece is called 1,000 Masks, he began, his voice carrying a mix of vulnerability and strength. It's about how we all hide parts of ourselves, afraid of what others might see if we let the masks fall. He launched into his monologue, his words weaving a tapestry of emotion and self-discovery. Ethan's performance was raw and authentic, his voice cracking at times as he spoke of fear, failure, and the courage it takes to embrace imperfection. As he reached the final lines, Ethan's gaze found Ryan's in the crowd. And so I stand here, mask in hand, not to impress. Not to compete, but to finally be seen. The theater fell silent for a moment before the applause began, loud and heartfelt. Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he bowed, the weight of his insecurities momentarily lifted. As the talent round continued, Claire found herself reflecting on the boys' performances. Ryan's song and Ethan's monologue had revealed sides of them she hadn't fully understood before. Ryan wasn't just the confident athlete with something to prove, he was a young man searching for his own voice. And Ethan wasn't just the determined underdog, he was someone brave enough to confront his fears in front of the entire school.
When the final performance ended, the judges retreated to deliberate, leaving the audience to buzz with speculation. Backstage, Ryan and Ethan found themselves standing side by side, the tension between them replaced by something quieter. "That was incredible," Ryan said, breaking the silence. Ethan glanced at him, surprised. "Thanks, your song was amazing, too. I didn't know you could do that." Ryan shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "There's a lot you don't know about me." Ethan chuckled. "Fair enough." They stood in silence for a moment before Ryan spoke again. "Look, I know we've had our differences. Okay, more than just differences. But I respect what you did up there, and I respect you." Ethan's smile widened. "Thanks, I respect you too." The handshake that followed was brief but genuine, a tentative truce between two rivals who had finally begun to see each other clearly. The judges returned, and the audience fell silent as the headmaster stepped onto the stage. "Before we announce the winner," he began, "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible talent and courage we've seen here today. Each of you has shown us what it means to truly express yourself, and for that, you should all be proud." The headmaster unfolded a piece of paper, his eyes scanning the names. "The winner of the Crestwood Champion competition is Ethan Carter." The theater erupted in applause as Ethan stood frozen in shock. He had done it, he had won.
Ryan was the first to approach him, clapping him on the back with a grin. "You earned it, man."
Ethan blinked, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Thanks, Ryan. That means a lot." As the applause continued, Claire approached the stage, her heart full as she watched the two boys exchange a smile that hinted at a newfound respect. Later that evening, the trio sat together on the steps of the amphitheater, the stars twinkling above them. The competition was over, but the journey they had taken together was far from finished. "So," Claire said, breaking the silence, "what's next for the Crestwood Champion?" Ethan laughed. "Honestly, I have no idea, but I think I'm finally okay with that." Ryan leaned back, his hands behind his head. "You know, winning isn't everything. Sometimes, it's about what you learn along the way." Claire smiled. "Looks like you two are finally on the same page." Ethan and Ryan exchanged a glance, their rivalry replaced by something stronger. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I think we are." As the night wore on, the trio sat together, their bond mended by the lessons they had learned. The Crestwood Champion competition had been about more than trophies and titles. It had been about discovering who they were and what truly mattered. And in the end, they had all come out as winners. Please like the video and subscribe the channel.
Chapter 10. Beyond the Crown. The Crestwood Champion competition had officially concluded, but the echoes of the journey remained. Ethan's victory was still the talk of the school, but for those who had taken part, the experience had been about far more than a title. Ryan, Ethan, and Claire sat together in the campus courtyard, where the early morning sun cast long shadows on the cobblestone paths. The trio had decided to meet after the results, not as competitors or bystanders, but as friends trying to understand what lay ahead.
"I still can't believe you won," Ryan said, his tone light and teasing as he nudged Ethan's shoulder. Ethan grinned. "Honestly, neither can I thought for sure you were going to take it after that song."
Ryan shrugged. "It wasn't my time, I guess. But I think I learned more by not winning."
Claire smiled at the two boys. Their transformation over the past weeks had been remarkable, and while she'd struggled to navigate her role in their lives, seeing them like this made everything worthwhile. The previous night's award ceremony had been a spectacle. After Ethan's name had been announced, he'd stood frozen on stage as the applause washed over him. "Congratulations, Ethan," the headmaster had said, handing him the trophy. "You've shown us all the power of resilience and authenticity."
Ethan had stammered a thank you before looking out into the crowd. His eyes had found Claire first, her expression a mix of pride and relief. Then he had glanced at Ryan, who had given him a nod of approval.
After the ceremony, Ethan had sought Ryan out in the bustling crowd. "Hey," he'd said, gripping the trophy tightly. "I wanted to say thanks. Not just for the support but for everything. I wouldn't have pushed myself so hard if it weren't for you."
Ryan had laughed, the tension between them finally gone. "Don't give me too much credit. You earned it, Ethan. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you."
That exchange had marked a turning point, a moment of reconciliation that felt long overdue. Now, as they sat together in the courtyard, the competition felt like a distant memory. "What's next for you, Ethan?" Claire asked, tilting her head curiously.
Ethan shrugged, setting the trophy down beside him. "Honestly, I don't know. Winning was great, but it's not the end all, you know. I think I want to focus more on what I'm passionate about, writing, performing. The competition reminded me of why I love it so much in the first place." Claire turned to Ryan. "And you, any big plans?
Ryan leaned back against the bench, his expression thoughtful. I think I need to have an honest talk with my dad. The competition made me realize how much I've been living for his approval instead of my own happiness. Music. It's something I care about, and I want to give it a real shot. Claire reached out and placed a hand on his arm. I'm proud of you, Ryan. That's a big step. He smiled at her, gratitude in his eyes. Thanks, Claire, I mean it. Ethan cleared his throat, drawing their attention. And what about you, Claire? You've spent so much time helping us figure ourselves out. What about your own dreams? She hesitated, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I think I want to study psychology. Being in the middle of this mess made me realize how much I enjoy helping people work through their struggles. Maybe I can turn that into something meaningful. Both boys nodded, their respect for her evident. You'd be amazing at that, Ethan said. Yeah, Ryan agreed. You've got a way of making people feel seen, Claire. That's rare.
As the morning unfolded, the conversation turned to lighter topics, inside jokes, shared memories, and the awkward moments that had brought them together. Remember when Ryan tripped during the sprint relay? Ethan teased, laughing. Ryan groaned, covering his face. Don't remind me. I'm still hearing about it from my teammates.
And Ethan's dramatic fall during his monologue rehearsal, Claire added, giggling. Hey, Ethan protested, though he couldn't help but laugh. I was channeling passion. Their laughter echoed across the courtyard, a testament to how far they'd come. Later that day, the trio wandered back to the amphitheater where so much had happened. The stage was empty now, the echoes of past arguments and revelations replaced by a peaceful silence. Claire climbed onto the stage, turning to face the boys with a playful smile. Okay, now that the competition is over, let's settle this once and for all. Who's the most talented? Ryan raised an eyebrow. Oh, come on, you're not starting this again.
Ethan grinned. I think the trophy already decided that.
Claire laughed, holding up her hands in surrender. Fine, fine, but seriously, you two have come a long way. I'm proud of both of you.
Ryan and Ethan exchanged a glance, their expressions softening.
Thanks, Claire, Ryan said. We couldn't have done it without you. Ethan nodded. Yeah, you were the glue that kept us from completely falling apart. Claire stepped down from the stage, joining them on the grass. You didn't need me as much as you think. You just needed to see each other for who you really are. Ryan and Ethan shared a smile, the rivalry that had once defined their relationship now replaced by mutual respect. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the amphitheater in golden light, the trio sat together, their bond stronger than ever. The competition had come to an end, but what they had gained was far more valuable than a trophy or a title. They had found friendship, self-discovery, and the courage to chase their dreams, not for anyone else, but for themselves. And in that moment, as they laughed and reminisced, they knew that the journey they had taken together was just the beginning. Please like the video and subscribe the channel.